Hello, we are the three Black Pratt grads. I am Mark Skinner. I'm here with my friends Greg Cleghorn and Kenneth Nelson. We are three African American men who graduated many, many years ago from Pratt Institute from their fine art photography program, which Greg likes to remind me every week. And I just see it as a photography program, but
forget every week.
well, I just like to see it as a photography program. But we
Okay.
each conversation have a different topic. We don't rehearse our conversations with one another. We do sort of select photographs sometimes from other people, photographs from ourselves, and we pick a topic. This week was my turn, and I picked landscapes. I picked landscapes pretty much because it's not something that any of the three of us really specialize in, although we have all in the years since Pratt have taken landscape photographs. The one thing that's really interesting is that because Pratt primarily dealt with street photography because it is based in a city, you didn't really have a lot of discussion, at least the classes I had, about landscape photography. So, and there was, they weren't a fan, at least one individual was not really a fan of Ansel Adams, with the exception of his technical prowess. But all that being said,
You take that back.
no, it's true. That I remember it was a class. This person said, if you just take the camera and put it there, you'll get the photo. I think it's a little more complicated than that, but we will. And
You take that back.
I'll tell you offline who it was. But basically, all I wanted to say was, based on all of our experience, we've all taken a lot of these landscape photographs, either intentionally or as we have traveled throughout the world. And it's my turn to start talking about photographs. So let's talk about the first photograph. All right, this is a landscape photo. Basically, it's a horizontal.
Ooh.
Yeah, right. It's a horizontal photograph. This was taken in Central Park, pretty much from the Fifth Avenue side up near the Hundreds, and it's on a cloudy day. So because it's a cloudy day, you get all of the light from above. It's like a gigantic softbox, and you get to see how well landscaped. Boom, boom. You get to see how well landscaped Central Park actually is. Okay, and it made me realize when I took this photograph how few landscapes I really made a point to go and take. Now, I did go on one photo expedition when I was very young to take landscape photographs, but it wasn't really as successful as I had hoped. But later on, I understood what I was lacking. And so even here, you can just take a great photo. But it's hard to take a bad photo in Central Park because it's all well manicured already.
Mm.
Next photo. Go
But,
ahead.
oh my God. Where's your decisive moment? This is just like a snapshot. There's like nothing going on here. You're like, oh, I'll take a landscape.
I'm glad you mentioned that because one of the key components to really great landscape photography that both Ansel Adams and someone who's contemporary, who's very, very popular, a guy named Peter Lick, Lik, uh, talk about is selecting a specific moment, particularly where the sun and the moon are in the sky. That's like
This
really.
looks like a nuclear holocaust. I'm waiting for the flash. The concussion to knock the trees down. Right? There's no sky detail at all.
Well, I think what you'll see is that on an overcast day, there isn't a sky, but it's the shapes of the foliage that remind me of the mountain ranges, and you get the echoing of the mountain ranges from the actual rock
In New
formation.
York City, there are mountain ranges.
Yeah, but they remind me of that. I didn't say they were. I said they remind me of that. So if you go to the next photo, and it's difficult to do landscapes within city confines. You find
Oh,
yourself
come on.
you find yourself either doing sort of semi-architectural work or
Right.
or photographs down streets. Previously I showed a photograph of down an alley, and that was very much like Aceh. But it's very difficult to do that unless you sort of step away and get sort of an overarching view of what the a portion of the city or the city itself looks like. And this is yet another horizontal, right,
Yeah,
image.
you're
And
like in
and
the
in-
most amazing city on the planet.
this is
Go
true.
ahead. I got nothing else. I'm zipping it.
Well, I mean,
Okay,
you
go
know,
ahead.
you'll see a lot of landscapes that are sunrise, sunset. All of the Manhattan buildings, staggered, but they tend to be relatively repetitive because it's so iconic.
Oh my
There's only
God,
so many.
repetitive.
Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
true. I mean, it's very difficult. And this is not necessarily original, quite honestly. If you stand in this spot, you will get this photo with the exception of one thing. I was very fortunate that the cloud formation formed this sort of chevron. I didn't paint those in. And so it was the cloud formation creating a chevron that was really where the point of the chevron was kind of right at the top of the Freedom Tower, and that mimicked where I was in that corner part of the landing. That's the just off the side of the Governor's Island ferry from the Brooklyn side. But it's really important to note that I haven't done any parallax correction or anything like that. It was just a snapshot that I didn't have a problem with how this was sort of, uh, how the buildings are sort of tilting in.
Uh-huh.
In this particular case, usually I get really nitpicky about it and say you really shouldn't do that because that's not optically correct. But in this case, I was okay with it. And if we go to the third photo from the other side, from the Jersey side, this is a little bit more specific uh, to the Freedom Tower in its space. And the reason why I am going to call it a landscape is because it's not just the tower itself, it includes that gigantic reflection that
Mhm.
the Freedom Tower casts into the Hudson River in late afternoon. And it also includes some of, I think it used to be called the Winter Garden. I don't remember what it's called now, but there are other buildings, Liberty Street and,
Uh-huh.
and some other parts of Lower Manhattan.
Yep.
And there's that little tiny sailboat to sort of give you a sense of scale.
Yep.
And so it's very similar to some of the photographs of Half Dome that Ansel did. So you can kind of see the influences of that. Where there's a glint of light, basically a dark sky, but I have a lot of clouds. I don't have just blue or just gray and black and white. But the idea about how to create the composition is very similar.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I have a question with in terms of this and what you just said is that someone has to have a visual reference of Half Dome to make any
Mhm.
connection to this, and have to have a knowledge of Ansel Adams to have any reference to that to bring it to this. So if they are absent of any of those three things, it's not going to come to mind for this. But
Exactly.
I think the image itself stands on its own, and I really enjoy that reflection of the wind on the water, and I think that is what for me makes the image much more successful in terms of the way I'm seeing it, and the sailboats just add to that as well. So, and I think it's kind of interesting because I think that if an image, and I'll say this off the cuff, if an image has, let's say, arbitrary number, 5% water in it, uh, would you consider it a landscape? Right? You
Yeah,
know, right?
it's a big question.
So that's a question.
As opposed to what? A water park,
As opposed to
water street.
90% sky and 10% water, 2% water and 98% sky, is it a landscape? And then there's that term cityscape. And is cityscape, transposable with landscape in a city fashion? I tend to
I
think it is. So that's why because I think cityscape is an accepted word, an accepted description of the landscape of the city. It's just city and it's just building. So I think the differences between the two are distinct, but I don't think it's a chasm wide enough where they can't be accepted as such.
I agree. I mean, if you actually drive anywhere or travel anywhere that's near a mountain range or near a valley or near a canyon, at the end of the day, if you point the camera at the canyon or at the mountain range, and you're a reasonably good photographer, you can get an acceptable image. You may not get an exceptional image, but you can get an acceptable image. And I
Yeah, but
think
isn't
that,
isn't the idea to get exceptional images? Do you want
oh,
it?
very
You
much
want it
so.
in
And I think Ken pointed out the fact that there's just a specific, there is a specific, you pointed out there's a specific time. There's a specific time where that sailboat is just to the right of the reflection. So there's a decisive moment in this particular case. And I think you'll find that in contemporary landscapes, there's a lot more uh, attention paid to the idea of just at a particular point in time, you get this special place at a special time from a special vantage point. And that seems to be, from what I can see, sort of perusing through landscapes, the real key to creating a great landscape. Now, if I were to go somewhere other than New York City and just take a photograph of a special view of, say, Bear Mountain, it might be fantastic. It might not. I mean, there's a photographer who's sold the
Oh my
most expensive
God.
photograph. Well, there's a guy named Andreas Gursky,
Hmm.
whose photograph is the highest selling photograph of all time at this point.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting, I kind of perused his work, and what's really interesting is he shows these patterns. We did I always talk about Bernice Abbott and the patterns, but he's taken that one step further, and instead of having sort of these uh, receding in space with leading lines.
Yeah.
He tends to do a lot of layers, very much like the Japanese ink
Are
prints,
they
where
shots of New York?
No,
I don't
Japan,
remember.
right? They're usually in Japan.
Yeah, well,
Japan and Europe.
Europe. He's from Germany, and the you'll see if you go to his website, it's Andreas Gursky. You'll see that from like 1980 forward, it's pretty traditional artistic photography. But right around the mid 90s, starts getting into its stride, and he does these huge landscapes of sort of apartment buildings with an
Yeah.
incredible, or the 99-cent store, the aisles stacked on one another, or
Hmm.
the Amazon warehouse aisles stacked on one another, or it's how capitalism creates these repetitive shapes. Sort of like the end result of manufacturing. He's even gone to a garbage dump and photographed sort of the landscape of the garbage heap. So that's it's it, you know these are landscapes, but they're not just pretty mountain chains or wonderful rivers winding through a
Wait, so
forest.
you're saying there's no way to take any more exceptional images of New York City? One of the most
No, no,
visually
no, no, no,
diverse
not at
places?
all. But I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is it's going to be more challenging because it's such a such a photographed area, and we have so much uh, visual information in each of our heads about what New York City looks like at any given time in history from when the photograph began. And so it's very difficult. I'm just saying it's difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it would be very difficult to sort of find a way to create a photograph of New York City that is recognizable as New York City, that isn't doesn't remind us of a lot of other imagery. It's very challenging.
Yeah, I'm of the idea that I understand what you're getting at. I think that someone has to spend a great deal of time looking at photographs in order to go or think that route. I don't think everyone is looking at these images to a degree where they'll see the same image over and over again 30, 40, 50 times by 30, 40, 50 different photographers. I don't think people are entrenched in photography that much. So I'm of the idea that a few people will see almost all the images of a certain photograph, but a very small amount of people will see all those certain variations of a photograph. So, sure, you can go up to the Empire State Building and take a photograph looking south toward the World Trade Center, right? And of course, everybody and their mother has done that, so people see it. But I don't think everyone who's ever been to the top of the Empire State Building has seen every photograph taken from that vantage point.
Oh no, I
So
agree.
I
I don't
think
think
to
they've
some
seen every,
degree, some
but
of those images that they see are going to be unique and different from the ones they're used to if they in fact took photographs. If they didn't, then it might be actually very special.
well, I
Uh,
remember years. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
and
I was gonna.
I think to some degree, I think what's happening now is I think that's why HDR has become so prominent in landscape photography, because things are so typical that in order to make your image different than the regular, you HDR it, you saturate it with a little bit of a tone, one way or the other. That's where you differentiate your image from the others, and people say, "Ooh, that's nice," but not realizing that the only difference between that image and another image is just the tonality, or maybe some sort of coloration that you added to it that's different. Same thing with shooting helicopters over New York City. It's so many of them. It's just amazing, and you can spend probably
Oh,
weeks looking at.
to be recognizable to the average person in New York City is tough because there are iconic, landmarks on
Yeah,
this landscape. It's tough. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I know when my mom was traveling when she was alive, in the late '80s and early '90s, she would travel, and at a certain point, when she was in the '70s, she would make sure she had a camera with her and she would take pictures. And by the time she got to the 1980s, 1990s, she would just say, you know what, I'm just going to buy the postcards at the gift shop because they have the best view of whatever the image is. And this is long before digital and cell phones. So, the idea of like just, taking pictures randomly, hoping
Yeah, but
we
you're
could get the
talking
picture
about a
as good as
casual photographer. We're not talking about a photographer. We're talking about a
well,
casual.
I'm going to make the presumption that, Kenneth had pointed out several episodes ago, it might be about 20 episodes ago, is that if someone is really kind of sticking with us at this point, they probably have an interest in photography. I'm not saying that I'm not interested in telling people who are new to photography, not speaking to them, but I am also not in the habit. I don't want to alienate uh, just by just making it too light to people who are really interested and have a real discussion. I mean, if they want to comment and challenge that or
yeah,
or show photographs, that's fine.
yeah.
I could be wrong. I just think it's very difficult to do it. And if you can do it, I'll say it. Now you guys might do that in this episode, and I might go, that's a really good landscape. I was completely wrong. But my main point is that I think it's very challenging to do because so much of the imagery that we see of a cityscape of any particular city
Yeah,
tends to be repetitive because it resonates for us over and over again collectively.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not saying it's
Do you
impossible.
hate photography?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you hate photography?
No, I don't hate photography. I mean, I don't. It sounds
Have
like
you
you're
given
not.
up on it?
Well, I mean, I think you ask the questions of me as if I mean I'm giving serious consideration to photography and how it's used in the world. You seem to always challenge me in a way that says, don't consider what is going on or has been going on.
No, that's not
If
what
it's
I'm
been done.
saying at
If it's
all.
been done, it's great. I mean, not every photograph
That's
is
not
great.
what I'm saying at all.
I mean,
I'm
great.
not saying that at all. But I
Well,
mean,
I
as a
mean,
photographer, it's your
uh-huh.
job and duty to get the best image possible, not to
I mean,
capture
yeah, I agree.
mediocrity.
Well, I think
I mean,
no,
if you, and
I
even
agree.
if you look at Gursky, the
Right.
pictures he does, I mean, his skies have tonality to them. All of his scapes have a tonality to them. Like the 99-cent store. I actually saw that in a 99-cent store because I'm a big fan. But he's muted the colors because it's like a carnival in there. And
Mhm.
muting the colors is a conscious choice.
Yeah.
I mean, but to say that I'll just take a snapshot of anything and then I'll just get the postcard. That like denigrates
Well, I
every
think
decent
those are two
photographer.
different those are two different things. I was using
Photography is a
the
whole process.
example I
Taking
was
the
using
pictures
the example
and
of an
posting them.
amateur to point out that that is how uh, many of us, not photographers, but how many of
Many
us
of us.
approach taking photographs when we travel. But at the same time, I agree with you. Gursky does great work. But at the same time, that's why I mentioned him. But I think at the same time, I think one should recognize that it's challenging. I mean, I'm sure there are photographic subjects that are challenging for you as well. And I'd love to hear you admit it's very challenging for me to take that photograph, because I'll tell you in a second, taking a really great landscape is and has been very challenging for me. That's all.
I think it's challenging for many people. So, hey, Greg, we've lost your feed. Are you still there? Okay, we've lost Greg.
No, I'm here. I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
I,
So,
I ran to
in order
I
to,
ran to the head so I could excuse
okay,
me. Have I got anything on my chest?
no,
Carrot,
okay.
peas,
In order to keep this small, can we move on to the
blobber.
next presenter?
Yeah,
So,
let's
Oh
move
yeah,
on.
I think
okay,
Greg is up next.
okay,
Need
great.
some,
Let's move on
mouthwash.
with you.
Yeah, let's go to my first picture.
Okay, we'll go to your
Seeing as
first.
how, unlike Mr. Nelson, who's usually very specific with his with his weekly challenge or bi-weekly, tri-weekly, yeah, whatever. When he comes up with something, he'll be very specific. This it was kind of wide open, so I chose to do kind of like a urban landscape. Um, for some reason, I've been attracted to covered conveyances, and it seemed the more I shoot them, it seems like the more I see, and it's kind of no, I can't even say it's an urban thing because I've seen plenty of people in in the city. You know, I am a Brooklyn boy. Ooh, Brooklyn, ho. Anyway, and for some reason, I've been very attracted to these covered vehicles or covered conveyances as a urban landscape study. Shape, form, you know. This is well, where I am in California, it's kind of like Long Island. It's very suburban, you know, house and a lawn and picket fence. Not here, but picket fence, 2.5 kids, all of that stuff. But for some reason, I've been drawn to these covered conveyances. So I've just been capturing them as I see them, and of course, it makes you wonder, geez, what's under there? You know, something that you care about enough to cover from the elements. So the house is clean and neat. It's got this yard. He's probably going to lay down some old turf so he can have a nice green lawn. And well kept. He cares about his vehicle. Next slide, please. Next slide. Same thing here. This looks like there's a throwback. You would never guess what I found just lying in the street yesterday. Negative, a colored negative. I was like, whoa. I took a picture of it, but it didn't fit with this. So, maybe another like Mark's picture of that Pratt acceptance, or
Yeah.
he's running high, throw this letter away, and he's acceptance and Pratt. It seems. But anyway, again, the idea of caring enough about your conveyance to cover it, and it looks. I had no idea. Most of the car coverings are about the same color, all over a pretty, very like I have a pretty good series going now. But the palm trees, the well kept lawns, again, cured, what do they call that? Landscaped, you know, uniformity. Everything looks kind of in place. It's got nice rims on the vehicle. You can tell it's kind of maybe a minivan or a trailer or some sort. Not trailer, what I mean. But it's an urban landscape to me. They have created this unique look with these vehicles that are, you know, ghostly almost. Go ahead, next picture, please. Same thing, the manicured, everything is covered and cared for. Hitler's Volkswagen. Did you know that was the Volkswagen? The Beetle was his trying to get cars cheap enough so everybody could ride on the autobahn that he created. Did you know that? Anyway, moving right along. So
Yeah, and then they swindled all the investors and
well,
made tanks.
well,
Yeah,
there's a thing about
yeah. Hitler
fascism, and
he took
yeah,
all the money. He took
yeah.
all the
But
money and made tanks.
thanks to the History Channel, the United States and the world is still kicking Germany's butt. They're still going to lose the war. And bravo. Anyway, so we got this manicured, and nice flowers and everything. And again, we have this covered uh, Volkswagen makes it that you know exactly. One thing I found interesting about this series is like no matter what you cover it with, you can almost tell what color
Yes, yeah, you
because
can.
you got that catalog,
Yes.
in your head.
Yep.
And it's a cool thing to see these things. And they're all regardless. They're taking the color out of it. They're taking everything but the shape, the form. This would be just as effective in black and white. I'm thinking about doing it in black. Because it just there's just something about the Pratt aesthetic, you know, the fine art aesthetic, form, color, texture, lighting, this and that, and I'm just getting such a kick out of it. And then while I'm out doing my morning walk next to me, we know what that is,
Yes, we did.
conveyance,
Yeah.
and the conveyance is person, it's
Yeah.
like, did somebody cover them up? I mean, no, they cover up dead bodies before the coroner carts them off, but this fellow or woman is is he cared for? I'm sure I'm making a political statement here, but I feel it's an emotional thing. When I came across this, I was like, oh my gosh, is this why I was shooting the other things that brought me to him, her, you know? And almost had the same color. I almost wanted to tap him and say, hey, can you pull that thing over your head so it can be all one color? But that would not have been.
Yeah.
So, urban landscape, I saw this, you know, uh, and it just kind of, he's okay. One of my instructors, he said, talk about the human condition. One of my Pratt instructors, it's like, the human condition, show how we are living, show how we're treating each other,
Hmm.
how we're living, like even the Gorski, kind of like a Warhol with the manufactured and mass produced, and everything is, a billion of these, you know, strips of this, very organized. And I was just kind of slapped in the face when I saw this because it's like, well, people have spent all of this money on the vehicle and then spend a gang more because those covers are not cheap to cover the vehicle, to care for it. But, we're not even really taking care of each other, guys out there. This is covered as any of the other conveyances. The body is a conveyance. I feel, like a bunch of your protests, like the BLM pictures and the
Uh-huh.
protests around the city. A lot of them they just kind of grab you by the shirt and say, "Hey, something's going on here, and
Yeah.
it's not right." There's an emotional impact that that I feel, you as a photographer felt an obligation to capture.
Hmm.
And I say bravo. Yeah, there's some of the shots, and they were, you know, evocative enough for someone at a museum of the city of New York to say, "Whoa, I want that at my museum." And I gotta say bravo because if it's lacking, visual impact, you know, or emotional impact, really not doing its job as a photograph. If it's not, you're not showing something that is new and fresh. Yeah, okay. New York has been photographed since cameras were cameras. Before that, when they photographed it with paint and brush. But like there was that image that you sent, Mr. Skinner, of the painting of Sully Ferretti's Subway. It was reminiscent of Ken's Subway shop, but it kind of has a Hopper-esque feel to it. But it's different, the way they capture the colors, the tonality, the way the light is in that space. Light in a subway is like nowhere else.
Yeah.
You're underground. You're, and it has a scent to it. Anybody that's been to New York City subway knows, and from years ago, it was like, oh baby, you were happy when the trains flew through because it changed the air in the space. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that urban landscape. That is a great topic. I think we'll do a part 2 on this for sure. But that's all I got. If you guys got any comments, I'd appreciate it. If not, let's move
Well,
right on.
it's just interesting because I think it's going to take, without context, the interesting the way you went about this is kind of interesting. And so the relationship between the first 3 images and the last one is paramount. So you're definitely it's paramount. You're making a very strong political statement. And within the context of what we're doing, as you show that and you end with that image, you're making the relationship between the first 3 and that fourth one, right? Automatically, you just are. So, and everyone has different ideas about what the context is, in the absence of your explanation of it. And even maybe with your explanation of it, they may just come to their own conclusion as well and disregard how you describe it.
Well, I think with all the images, basically you have object, person, right?
Uh-huh. So,
so what you're doing is you're daring people to object to turn the homeless person under the covers into an object in your heart, just like you have tried to discern what these big ticket items are under the car covers. So it's a storytelling trick that's really good, because I think each of those, it's basically, oh look, I've got a shell. Basically, what you've done is a visual shell game, and I think it's done very well, because basically you have to find the person,
right?
And I think it's really good. And if you showed them as a triptych, I think that would illustrate your point more so than individual photographs in a gallery, walking up to each one and going, oh, wait a minute, I get that's a person. Because as an individual photograph, I may not get the relationship without a lot of text in the legend or in the program or you speaking, how the car covers are relating for you to the people, other than I might think I'm clever and go, hey, that's just like the car covers over there. But I won't see the importance of the person that you're conveying in this conversation unless you show them together.
Yeah, I agree. It's a pick I could see, but it'd have to be a big one. But that's okay too. For me, I like the print big. I was saying 40 by 50 or larger. But I mean, it when I saw it, it was kind of gut punch for me, because it was like, wow, I mean, we care more for our cars than a person. What's the potential? We could be anything. There's so much that person can be, but he's covered just like the automobile. I don't know. This, they're yeah. I don't know. It just kind of slapped me in the face, and
it's very difficult to look at photographs of homeless people and not feel sympathy if you're a sympathetic person.
Yeah.
And so there's a built-in message into every photograph of a homeless person. I mean, we know someone who's showing a lot of homeless photographs on Facebook right now, and Ken, you know what I'm talking about. And you look and you go, yeah, that's exactly what's going on.
There's humans of New York. They did like an incredible. He got all kinds of
right. But when he does humans of New York, he doesn't concentrate on one socioeconomic class. What he did was he tried to create a mosaic of what New Yorkers are like in all of our iterations, rather than just one specific class. And,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're wrong
Yep. Did he freeze?
to look at. For me, it's very difficult to look at a photograph of a homeless person objectively, and because I'm sympathetic, I have
You
the
don't
same reaction
photograph homeless
every.
people, so
Well,
I mean,
I'm
I don't
sympathetic in a way.
understand that.
I'm sorry. What was that?
You don't photograph homeless or houseless people, so
I have occasionally. I mean, I have one photograph of a homeless
whoa.
person that is on my website with other people around them, and it's in context of the story. They're reaching into the garbage right next to a Rolls Royce. So that is the one homeless photograph I have, and I don't. That's it for me. That pretty much says what New York is like. I mean, there's homeless and there's the obscenely rich juxtaposed against one another all the time, and they spend a good amount of their time trying to avoid one another. In the middle class, we are very much conscious of what it takes to be either, and we try to avoid being one and try to not be so much in admiration of the other.
Yeah.
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 Next, your turn, Kim.
Okay. All right. All right. I will anchor this just to keep us going short. So, as you folks out there will probably notice, I'm going to be the one who stuck to the most classical sort of landscape theories of the three of us. So I'm going to start
Ooh.
with this one. And so I'll start in, this is sort of in a sequence order.
The
In,
Canyon Grande.
in 1998, I took my first trip out to the Grand Canyon, and I walked up to the South Rim, and I was awed, just in awe as anyone else who has gone there, and realized how gigantic and amazingly small. I'm sorry, how gigantic it is, and how small we as humans are. And so when I went the first time, I did it as a ending to a business trip that I was on. And so at the end of that business trip, I decided, okay, I got a couple of days. I'm going to go to the Grand Canyon. I drove up and I went there and I was like, basically, I was a tourist with a snapshot camera. So I went with a small camera. But I made sure that I was going to come back with a little bit more sensibilities about being dogmatic about photographing as a landscape photographer. So this particular image was in color, and I was like, wow, so yeah, I was in awe and I was like floored. Then afterward, I went back. Actually, this is another place. So in 2004, I decided, okay, I'm going to go two places, and this is one of two places, and this is a part of Death Valley, California.
Looks like a glacier.
It does look like a great glacier. It's actually the remnants of a volcano in
Oh, really? Okay.
California. Yeah, yeah. And so it's called Ubi Crater in Death Valley, California. And this
Where?
is the rim in Ubi.
I'm sorry, you broke up. Say that one more time.
No, I'm not going to say it again. Okay, and this is on my trip down. So these are all my classical, and I was like, yeah.
Is that
When
something
you
you get when you're frightened? You get the ooby heebies?
Okay, Greg. Of course, yeah. I switched to black and white for this particular occasion and for the successive particular occasions because my thought processes and my ideas about how to capture it were ensconced in relating tonalities rather than color. That same Now
Ooh.
this is the third trip. I'm sorry, the third trip to the Grand Canyon, and this was of course a night shot. And I'm sorry, early morning sunrise before the
Over
sun
the
comes
rim?
up, and at the rim, yeah. And it's just another way to detail landscape without showing almost any part of the landscape except the horizon line. So it's one of my favorite images. And of course, there's the crescent moon in the upper right hand corner shown as part of it. So for me, this is all indicative of classic landscape photography.
Why is this one of your favorites? Sorry.
Huh?
Why is it one of your favorites?
Oh, because it reeks of landscape without showing you the entire landscape. It's
Like an
just,
anti-landscape.
it's sort of like you got this one line, the horizontal line that indicates the landscape, and it's up to you to
Ah,
decide what it is. You know,
it's
what's
like a
happening below in that dark area, you know?
it's like a Man Ray uh,
Okay.
radiogram
Like a
landscape.
photogram, Greg, is what you're saying?
Yeah, okay. I think that's a far reach, but I'll just consider it landscape. All right.
It works. I like
Uh,
it.
yeah. And so, and then what happened was, I went back in 2009, and one of the things about this image that I think is kind of key is it tells you, and I referenced this in the first image with the color, was that how gigantic the canyon is and how small we humans are.
Right, yeah.
And so this image right here really is in total indicative of how the total difference is. I mean, as you can see, these are people on the viewing area of the Grand Canyon, and they are just so
Mhm.
minuscule compared to the depth and grandeur of the Grand Canyon. And
Yeah.
so, if for me, this is one of the most amazing photographs that I've taken because it really shows the. I mean, I guess it sort of shows a couple of things: the fortitude with which man creates things, but also the goal for him to think that he's bigger than the planet. It just doesn't just he just can't make it.
Well, I have to ask you a question. There is a tremendous amount of visual information in this photograph in the bottom four fifths, right? So I have to ask you a question about the first one,
Uh huh.
right?
Uh huh.
And the second one. The first one, if you go back to the color image, right? Now, there's this little slither of sky in the upper right hand corner. Is that
Yeah.
what that
Yeah.
is? Now, when you frame that, what made you decide to just leave just that much? Was that for any particular reason?
No, I just there was too much. There was nothing below that was of interest, and I was trying. And this is a rangefinder camera, so I was not looking through the viewfinder.
Okay.
So at best, I was using the rangefinder patch inside and the crop marks, and it was telling me that I had cropped it out. But when I got the negative back, it wasn't cropped out, and I said, okay, it's negligible, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Okay. And
Because
then
I
the
think.
second question I have is, since you've taken this photograph,
Uh-huh.
there's been all of this extraordinarily high saturation imagery around this type of landscape. Do you feel that, and I'm sure this is how it looked. Do you feel that what what we do in terms of trying to get things to look as they are uh, is how does that compare for you to all of the extraordinarily high saturated photos we see of this type of subject?
There's twofold. One is that there's certain ways you photograph the canyon that you can get those super saturations just on its own. Because I'm dealing with it in a couple of images I shot when on this trip, and I can't tone down the saturation. It's just the way the sunlight hits the canyon, and it just gives you this amazing reddish orange, and I cannot get rid of it. And I'm saying this doesn't look real, but yet it's the way I photographed it. No augmentation, no adjustments on my part. Then if you look away the other direction, you get this and you say, okay, that's more of a realistic view of what I saw. But they're both real. One just doesn't look real, but it is. And the other one is actually true to what I saw. And
Hmm.
so it's in my head, me trying to make something that looks unreal, which is actually real, to make it look visually real for the viewer. But I'm trying to
Right.
convince you
Well,
that no, that's real. But in
well,
order for me to convince you it's real, I have to tone down the saturation.
right. And this particular view of the Grand Canyon is very similar to the type of challenge that one has when photographing a cityscape from a vantage point of a skyscraper.
Yes, yes, right. Because you have to consider all the things that are within the frame. What to include, what not to include. What story are you trying to tell versus what you don't want to include to further the story in the way you'd like it to be rather than the other way around.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question is very similar. Not excuse me, not second image, the third image where you have, where you really challenged us as viewers to sort of understand that this is a very minimalist view of a landscape, and I'm not going to give you every piece of information. Since you've taken this photograph, have you found yourself wanting to go back and draw out some of that information, or is this exactly as you want this image, this space, this time to be for the viewer?
As the uh, interested photographer who wants to sort of investigate all possibilities, I didn't just photograph it this way when I was there. I photographed it with detail and without detail. And I was there for over 2 hours in that particular spot, photographing it as the sun rose. And there are variations on this image, and the only one I decided to use was this one. The images with detail in the shadows don't hold water for comparison to this one. Right? Because, when you see inside and all you see are rocks and gravel and layers, and you're like, right? Been there, done that. This one,
space
right?
is really
well, you've got black, you've got white, and you've got gray, and you've got gradient. So it's pretty much all of the things that one would want in a photograph are in their most minimal here.
Yeah.
But they're there.
Yeah.
I got you.
I don't. Yeah. I think it's Yeah. And it's iconic. So if you look at this landscape, you wouldn't think of almost you would think of the Southwest maybe, and you wouldn't think of Utah. You wouldn't think of Colorado. You'd have to think of maybe Arizona.
Right, but you think if it's
maybe
west of the Mississippi.
Utah, I could get away with Utah. You could get away with Utah.
Yeah.
Right, but it does say west of the Mississippi, whether you've been there or not. We now have enough television and film and websites to say, okay, I get it. That's out west.
Yep. Cool.
And okay, let's move. Historically, when the Trailblazers sent back reports of Yellowstone and all the other places that they saw that were just Grand good Lord. Help me out here.
Grand Canyon. Half Dome. Okay, Yosemite.
Thank you. They sent back reports, and the people back east that read the reports said, "Oh, this is possible. This is fantasy. You're making it up." But this guy wrote a book, and the publisher, poo-pooed it and said, "Oh, this is fiction."
Mm-hmm.
It's like these places just literally boggle the mind. You just can't grasp it, and it's even, for a photographer to challenge himself to capture it a different way or capture it, like you were saying, 2 hours in one spot, just trying to get different variations on a theme. It's commendable, but you didn't just stand there, take a snapshot, and then boogie back to the car.
Did not. Nope. Okay, and the last one for you is just this one, which I thought I'd share.
The Death Valley.
It's my first trip into Death Valley in 2004, and what was interesting about this was that this is the first time I began to use this panoramic camera with the panoramic framing. So it wasn't a crop; it's actually the way you look through the camera, and I think that what it gave me was the ability to actually see panoramically better than using a regular camera and cropping in to make it look panoramic. I think there's a certain sensibility that using a panoramic viewfinder gives you with the framing that you cannot get in trying to crop an image to a panoramic. I don't think it has the same sensibilities.
I agree.
So I think you have to see it in its form and do it there in order to achieve as best as image as possible. And it's just.
I think you can pre-visualize it,
right?
But I think what you're alluding to is the idea that if you don't have the frame already set up,
right,
you're likely to sort of, and I put in quotation marks, cheat in the dark room or in the light room, and sort of slide the crop up and down on the frame wherever you want.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. So that's all I got. Unless you guys got questions.
No, I'm fine.
No,
Is
Greg?
that all? Is that all we have?
Okay, guess so. Okay, Mark.
I
All right.
like the idea. I think we should do a landscape part two.
Yeah,
If you wish, that's fine. I,
good.
Because I wasn't sure, and that's
I
why
I'm still
I
in New
have
York,
some
so
open spaces, but
I'm sure I can cover that.
come on, man, you
All right.
got to be kidding me. You got the
Well,
Palisades. There's so much in New York. You could go into freaking, parts of Prospect Park and get landscapes. It's like
That is true.
there's
Very
a
much so.
million acres. There's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
but if you don't want to
Well,
try,
I'm
but
just
what if you try?
I'm being silly. I'm being silly. All right. All right. So are we ready to close this out or
yeah. Let me just, Greg. You have the next consideration for topic. So, do you want to make it landscape
Landscape part
part two?
two.
Okay. So our next episode will be
okay?
part two. Good.
All
Okay,
right.
Mark. We're ready.
All right. Well, we have been the three Black Pratt grads
You still are.
photography. Pratt was an industrial arts college to start with, just so you know. That's what started. We talk about photography every couple of days, and we post these wonderful talks on YouTube for everyone. And we hope that you enjoyed this evening. We talked about landscape. Apparently, we are going to be talking about landscapes again. So hopefully,
With a
part two will
different
be
twist.
will be our next topic. So if you missed this one, maybe you can just watch the next one. All right, here we go. I am Mark Skinner. I am here with Kenneth Nelson and Gregory Cleghorn, and we'll talk to you next time.